Shadow Minister Dr. Luke Evans.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we've established that dementia is a thief, not once, but twice. First the mind, then the memories, leaving the greatest pain not with the sufferer, but with those who remember. I'd like to thank the member for South Devon for securing such an important debate and speaking so passionately and openly about her story, as did many across this House. And I'd also like to thank Alzheimer's Society, Alzheimer's Research UK, Dementia UK, and all those people who advocate for dementia and their families. Because as we've heard, there are 1 million people living with dementia in the UK, projected to rise to 1.4 million by 2040. 1 in 6 hospital beds are occupied by dementia patients, and dementia sufferers are 3 times more likely to see their GP. And modelling suggests that 70% of care home residents are people living with dementia. Now, in this House, I've often enjoyed the tired lines from the opposition about how the Conservatives never did enough on X or Y or Z. And as Labour are ably demonstrating, it's easy to stand across the aisle and say nothing is ever enough. But as they are learning, delivering the real world is far harder and demanding than from the sidelines. And on dementia, the Conservative governments led from the front. More funding, better diagnosis, and a national commitment to change lives. Now, we all agree we must continue to do more. But to do that, you need direction and action, and that's what we're exploring here today, almost 1 year on from the introduction of a Labour government. Of course.
The Shadow Minister can remind us in terms of the commitment in 2019 Conservative manifesto around the dementia moonshot, and when they, when that was delivered.
I'm very grateful, and if the lady will bear with me, I'm actually going to canter through what we've done in the last 14 years, because it was, after all, the premiership of Lord Cameron who set the challenge for dementia and the ambition for England to be, I quote, the best country in the world for dementia care and support for people with dementia, their carers and their families to live. So, on to the point. 2012, the Prime Minister set the challenge to make us a global leader, increase awareness and research. This included the Dementia Friends initiative, a public campaign to boost understanding with over 1 million dementia friends trained by 2015. Increased research funding, doubling from 2010 to 2015. In 2015, the Prime Minister's challenge on dementia to 2020, setting national goals for diagnosis rates, care quality and research impact, including dementia diagnosis rates with a national target of 66.7% met in 2015. 2016 and 2017, the UK Dementia Research Institute, launched under Theresa May, was a flagship initiative which was backed by £290 million for the government and for charities. This was actually delivered at £300 million in dementia research innovation by March 2020, a full year ahead of schedule. We then had the NHS long-term plan in 2019, which committed to enhance the diagnosis. 2019, we had the Moonshot Pledge, which was from Boris Johnson, which was an extra 160 million, which was followed up by 2022 with the Dame Barbara Windsor Dementia Mission, a £95 million fund to accelerate research into treatment and early diagnosis. Of course, the pandemic hit and we had the recovery, but that's why the government set out the 2023 Major Conditions Strategy, which would have included dementia. Now, there is therefore a question to this government as to the priority it gives dementia since taking office. And it's worth looking at why there are concerns raised, because the government, rightly so in their own right, did not opt to proceed with the Major Conditions Strategy. This might surprise some members, but we heard from the current Minister of Member of State and member for Bristol South, who sat in her place, for a call for a dedicated dementia strategy a number of times when she was on this side of the House. Only last year, when she was following up in a Westminster Hall debate on new dementia treatment, she said, I quote, "As my honourable friend, the member for Oldham East and Saddleworth said, it's disappointing the government shelved plans for a dedicated dementia strategy. England remains the only nation without a specific dementia strategy. This is very short-term thinking, and it would be interesting to hear from the Minister about that. In 2020, I said we cannot give confidence to people suffering with dementia and their carers without a much clearer plan that is in place very quickly. This remains the case today." End quote. So I'd like to ask the Minister, does he stand by these comments, and can we expect, therefore, a dedicated dementia strategy? You see, it's easy to understand on this side of the House that governing is difficult. Good intentions make fine opposition speech until they collide with reality. So, does he continue... beg your pardon, I thought I was intervened on by the Speaker then for a second. So does he plan to carry on with a dedicated strategy, if he'd be kind enough to confirm that today? And on the topic of strategies and comments made by Labour ministers before taking office, I note that in a Westminster Hall debate on inequalities in dementia services only last year, in May, less than a week before the general election, the Shadow Health Minister and now independent member for Gorton and Denton promised a carer strategy. Now, he said, quote, "They are vital parts of fighting against dementia and they will be at the heart of Labour's plan in government. There will be a carer strategy under the next government because we value the vital work our carers do. It will be a cross-government strategy with the Department for Work and Pensions, for Education and for Future Work Review, all feeding in along with the Department for Health and Social Care. There is a bright future for those living with dementia and their families and carers. Labour will deliver on it." End quote. A laudable aim. However, since the election, it does appear all is not quite as it seems. You see, in an oral question in the other place in November, Baroness Merrin made it clear that she had, quote, "not committed to a national strategy," stating, "I do have to say to the noble Baroness that I have not committed to a national carer strategy. However, in our joined-up approach, we will certainly be looking at what is needed. That will be very much part of our considerations on the workforce strategy, which Minister Karen Smith will lead on. It is crucial for the delivery of these services." End quote. So therefore, could I ask the Minister today, are there still specific plans for a national care strategy? Now, to progress.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. As he knows, at the beginning of this year, the government, the current government, and NHS England removed dementia from its planning guidance. Its planning guidance sets its priorities for the year ahead, and crucially, removed the diagnosis targets. My view is that was a cruel blow to people living with dementia and their families. Would the Minister like to give his view on the government removing dementia from its targets and priorities?
Shadow Minister.
All right. I'm grateful, first of all, for him promoting me, and second of all, for his expertise in this area, because I understand his work for Dementia UK. And he is absolutely right, and he's beaten me to the chase. One of the real concerns that charities and patients have raised is exactly that, the taking away of this crucial diagnosis target. And actually, we only need to look at Wales, where this wasn't the case, where the national diagnosis rate is 56%, 10% lower than in England. So on top of this, the government is presiding over a major top-down restructuring with cuts to integrated care boards and NHS England, whilst forcing through devolution on the 21 county-run authorities responsible for social care, whilst raising taxes in the Employment National Insurance contribution on care providers that's going to get passed on to local councils, whilst raising taxes on the very dementia charities and others who provide support, whilst we learnt last week that they're ditching the fast-track social work scheme, whilst we learnt they're terminating the NHS and care volunteers response who help support care, whilst scrapping the cross-party talks on social care, instead swapping it to an independent commission, which is led by Baroness Casey, who's still seconded to the Home Office. Madam Deputy Speaker, we can all see what's being taken away and taxed. It's what's going to benefit dementia support and care that's much harder to spot. Now, I appreciate, in the rough and tumble of this place, it's not lost on me how much this issue touches the Minister himself. He's spoken bravely and openly about his family's struggle, and I have the utmost respect for him and what he has been through, and I've been through similar with my grandmother, Dot. So I do not question his heart, simply gently challenge the government on his policies to achieve better dementia care for all. To that end, in closing, I have a couple of questions. Will the government commit to setting a new target to increase dementia diagnosis rates across England? Will the integrated care systems facing restructuring and budget resolutions? How does the government plan to hold local systems to account on dementia diagnosis, especially across NHS and social care? Now, we've seen from Wales how irregular data collection on dementia diagnosis affects overall diagnosis rates. What steps will the government take to improve the quality of data in dementia diagnosis, particularly when it comes to follow-up? And given the growing prevalence of dementia in our care homes, what steps will the government take to support providers and ensure that social care workforce is trained effectively to meet the needs of care users? With the upcoming spending review and long-awaited 10-year plan for the NHS expected in the next couple of months, I trust the Minister sat in front of me. He is the right person to highlight to the government the seriousness and importantness of tackling dementia, just like the last government understood. After all, I return where I started. Dementia steals the most from those left remembering, because the greatest heartbreak is losing someone who's still here. But with compassion for families, dignities for those who suffer, and a relentless pursuit for a cure, we can not only offer not just care, but hope.